Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Nia Desnia Show, where I share tips and resources to help SMEs thrive. Of course, this program is just for educational and informative purposes only. All right. So thank you for being here. So let's get started. Now, I spoke the last time I was here. I talked about the advantages of a franchise. Remember, if you didn't watch that episode, please go ahead and watch that. So the advantages of owning a franchise. And remember, I'm not looking at the franchisee. I'm not at the franchisor because remember, this is about SME, small and medium-sized enterprises or small and medium-sized businesses that want to expand, you know, expanding through franchising. And of course, great things. I gave great advantages last time. And I always say, you know what, before you actually make a decision, also look at the disadvantages. Now, regarding the disadvantages, right? Um, I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to highlight few of them because I mean, there's no time, and of course, you can actually better do a better research to make sure that you understand the advantages and disadvantages, right? But of course, I always say work with a professional. If you don't have a professional that you're working with, please, that's my the website, the um, tiniadesian.com. Navigate to my CPA website where you can set up a consultation, right? And where I can actually start the process with you on if you should franchise or not, right? So again, this is for educational and informative purposes. Informative purposes only. All right. Yeah, it's been a long day, so forgive me. All right. So one of the issues here when we're looking at franchising, I know when I looked at the advantages, I actually mentioned branding, right? You're out there, right? You're branding, you're out there. I mean, you can actually reach a lot of locations, which is good, very good, right? But when we're looking at branding, there's a lot of you sort of give you give your franchisees some kind of independence. And it's very important that the your franchisee really matches the brand, what you're actually looking at when it comes to what you created, the goals, the objectives, right? What you created. So it's important for your franchisee to align themselves with your brand. And that is a risk, right? What about if they don't? What happens if they have a different marketing message? What happens if they don't align what you started? What happens? All right. So that is really a big risk. Because yeah, you might meet someone that is personally has the money, the franchise, upfront fee, everything. But at the end of the day, the brand is not really aligned with what you wanted it to be, right? So that is a risk. If you don't have that much of control, right? So I will talk about mitigating some of these issues, right? Or risk. Another risk is the legal aspect of it. Agreements, right? I always advise anybody that is getting into an agreement with anyhow, anywhere, and with anything, right? Please make sure that you don't just assume or just pick it up from somewhere, the internet, or without making sure that this kind of what you're trying to do, you have a competent attorney. And when I say competent, I'm not saying attorneys are not, but an attorney that is actually specialized in the franchise field, right? The attorney that understands what should be in a contract, right? I always advise anyone that wants to sign any agreement related to franchising, make sure it's an attorney that is specialized in that field that looks at that your contract, checking if everything is aligned, right? So yes, risk of legal issues, yep, but mitigating that is making sure that you have an ironclad contract with your franchisee, ironclad, making sure it's detailed, making sure there's no ambiguity, making sure that that is, I mean, and then of course making sure that if anything happens, that there's any issue with maybe of course disagreements, who's handling that? Are you going to arbitration? What are you doing? Are you to solve that issue? Make sure everything is there. But I mean, as I said, I always say this, if you watch any of my shows, I'm not an attorney, but I've seen things in the business world that always that that can be an issue, and always allows me to emphasize that don't assume, right? Make sure that that's the mitigating, that's how to mitigate that risk factor, right? Of um having having legal issues, going to court all the time. All right. Because if you have an ironclad contract, right, that the franchisee signs, I mean, even if there's an issue and the franchisee takes it to their attorney, the attorney will say, this is a case that you're going to lose. Unless, I mean, the attorney says, okay, you know what, let's still go to court. But sometimes the attorney says, you know what, let's settle out of court because this is not a good case for you, right? Because you have an ironclad contract, right? Another issue is sometimes is the training. You know, sometimes it's very expensive to train a franchisee. So how do you mitigate that? And I'm going to tie that to the first point where I mentioned that branding and all kinds of things that could happen when the franchisee goes to another, goes the other way. Of course, the contracts, of course, will be solid. Of course, contracts, solid contract. But when we're looking at point one, which I talked about branding, it's important that you understand who's actually going to be your franchisee. It's not about the money. The person has paid the money, paid everything upfront. You have to actually have some kind of criteria to know, okay, this might not work. And that's why it's tied. That's the first, when it comes to the first part of it. Is this person out to grow their own brand without really looking at, I'm a franchisee. So how do you have to have some kind of criteria where you actually analyze or check and say, okay, if this person is really the right person for you, right? To have be part of your franchise, right? Now, I talked about training. Now, there's nothing wrong with training and, having that person to trained or any new franchisee, but you have to make sure that you look at the cost benefit analysis, right? Is it that it's so complex that you're spending so much time in training? Remember, downtime is a cost. People forget that the time that the franchise is not operating, the franchisee is not operating, right? It's actually zero revenue coming to you, especially if you pay, you are actually having your franchise fee, you're asking them to pay, based on a percentage. All right. So you have to make sure that that somebody that is being trained, that the training process and that's the mitigating, how to mitigate that risk of just putting so much time and effort on training and really losing out and not receiving your franchise fee because the cost, you're looking at the cost benefit analysis. How do you mitigate that? By making sure you set up very good training package. Make sure that it's not so cumbersome. Make sure it's detailed and make sure it's easy to understand, right? Now, as I said, please, it's important because these are just 3 disadvantages, which of course I looked at the mitigating factors that you can actually mitigate this, or should I say disadvantages or risk, you can mitigate those risks. But again, it's good to look at the entire picture before you decide on franchising. Talk to a professional, all right? There are good things there, but there are also disadvantages or risks. And of course, as I said, it's beyond the few advantages and the few disadvantages or the risk that I've actually talked about. So it's important for you to really talk to a professional. And of course, if you don't have a CPA working with you, of course, you can, yours truly, please, reach out to us. All right. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to seeing you next time. And of course, ensure, again, want to make sure you know that if you want your SME to thrive, you have to be intentional.